What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out the latest video here on the channel. Today we have the continuation of this massive tier list that we started about a week ago now. Every single TV show that I have ever seen in a tier list to celebrate the 100th video on this channel. If you missed the first two parts, those will be linked in the description, but just to recap here for anyone that's new to this series, we have here a list on the Tier Maker website with every single show that I have ever watched here, well over 750 different series here. You can see we've already had a healthy amount on the tier list here, filling up each of the world famous 7 tiers here, but we still have much more to go through. So we're just going to go here for about an hour to an hour and a half or so and knock out another big portion of this tier list. Of course, let me know in the comments what are some of your favorite and least favorite shows that you've seen, and let's dive right back into it here. Beginning this part off with the true TV show Fameless here. During True TV rather's peak, this was definitely one that I watched quite a bit. I'm going to throw it in the good tier. It's not definitely their most well-known. There's definitely a couple shows that I think are a little bit better than this one. This one did get a little repetitive. It's basically like Candid Camera, if you've ever seen that, or like Punk'd or something like that, like hidden camera, pranks essentially. It's a repetitive formula that is good in small doses, is the best way I would describe it. So I'd say good tier is fair for that. Next up here, we have a titan of animated TV. We have Family Guy here. This one for sure is definitely going to go all the way up in the God tier. I really don't know a single person that doesn't at least respect Family Guy. There's definitely people out there that aren't really that big on it, definitely not their cup of tea, but no one that I know, at least, that doesn't appreciate what it's done for TV and animation. I mean, like I said, it is a true titan for sure. Seth MacFarlane, what a genius creator there and writer, of course, for the show. Absolutely fantastic. Cannot deny it, and definitely going to go in the God tier. Next up here is Family Matters, and for Family Matters, I'm going to put it in the good tier. I think Family Matters is actually quite good comparably to where most people I think would rank it. I think it's usually pretty low on most people's lists, which is surprising considering how long it was on for, the impact it had for family sitcoms and black sitcoms, especially of the time there. But just from what I've seen, I just haven't seen enough of the show to really rank it super high, only bits and pieces here and there. So I'll put it in the good tier. I think it's fair. Next up, Family Time here. Definitely one of the more obscure shows on this list from Bounce TV, an all-black syndicated network mostly that play movies and old black sitcoms, but they have some original programming as well, including this show here, Family Time, with Cuba Gooding Jr., believe it or not. I'm going to put it in the good tier. It's okay. I've seen, a handful of episodes here and there. It's definitely not something it's not like appointment TV. I wouldn't, go and watch it every single day by any means, but for what it is, it's not that bad. Next up here, Famous in 12. This was a bad show, my friends. What a dumb idea for a show and a terrible execution. The whole gimmick was they had this family who wanted to be, reality show stars, kind of like the Kardashians, and their whole goal was just to get them famous within the 12 episode span of the show. And just did not work out at all. These people are absolute nobodies. I don't even remember who they were, honestly, from the episodes I saw. And if I remember correctly, it was pulled after only like half its run or something, because it just wasn't getting any good ratings or anything. It just was not working in their favor. So they just canned it pretty quickly. And yeah, for a social experiment TV show, I appreciate, I guess, what they tried to do here, but it was just a dumb idea. We really didn't need any more Kardashian knockoff type shows, so definitely going in the bad tier with that one. Another one that's definitely going down low on this tier list, all the way to the bottom of the barrel here, Fanboy and Chum Chum. I don't need to be the broken record that tells you how awful and how god terrible this show is, man. This thing is just just absolutely horrible, man, especially for Nickelodeon standards, because that was my favorite channel growing up for any kids content, and definitely for animated shows. I mean, this just absolutely took their stock down so far, man. Some people have argued that they haven't even recovered since this. since it came out back in 2009, that they've really been on that downward slope ever since. So, that's definitely arguable, but for me, yeah, definitely going in bottom of the barrel, man. I do not trust anyone that supports this show. No way. Just absolutely awful. A show that is not awful, however, is much, much better is Fargo here. I talked to this one in length in my pilot project, so I won't go too deep into this one, but yeah, we're definitely going to go A1 tier here. I mean, that was a top 10 pilot for sure. Absolutely phenomenal performances there by Martin Freeman, and Colin Hanks was great, and of course Billy Bob Thornton as the lead there, as our anti-hero protagonist there. If you like crime dramas here, this is definitely one you're going to want to check out. And it's an anthology series, so every season, focuses on different characters there. So it's not like you have to binge through the entire series. You can just watch, one, season at a time there, and you can get the full story, which is always a benefit in my opinion. So all things told, definitely going A1 tier with that. Following that, we have another Nickelodeon cartoon here, The Fairly Odd Parents. This one has definitely, I think, gotten a little bit of a hit or miss quality, since it came out, because there's been a lot of reboots, a lot of spin-offs, and just, a big franchise that's kind of formed out of this one. I'm going to go good tier. It wasn't like one of my top tier favorites like SpongeBob or anything like that, but it was definitely one I came back to every once in a while. Obviously, Timmy as our lead character here was a lot of fun. Wanda and Cosmo were a ton of fun as well there. Definitely some memorable characters in this one for sure. So all things told, I'll say good tier for The Fairly Odd Parents. Fawlty Towers, a British sitcom here that I used for my pilot project. It also made the top 100 TV shows of all time. And as you can tell, I do not understand why. I definitely disagree with this one. I'm going to go bad tier here. It just doesn't really speak to me, I think. It's just very dated, in my opinion. It's from the 70s, so obviously some of the jokes, some of the comedy itself isn't going to age very well, and, there's different sort of cultural, aspects that they make fun of here, being in Britain, so it doesn't really speak to me as, someone in America here. So all things told, just not really my cup of tea here. I'm going to go a bad tier. All right, next up here, two of my favorites when it comes to current day dramas here. We have the FBI shows. We have International, and then we have the OG FBI. For International, I don't think this one is quite as strong, so I'm going to put this one in the great tier. And then the OG one here, I'm going to go up in A1 tier. You guys know me, I absolutely love the Dick Wolf shows here, and FBI is another strong series here that definitely gives him some credibility as one of the best TV creators and producers out there, of course, known for the Law and Order series and the One Chicago series, and then now FBI as well. Got that triple threat on TV right now with network TV and just absolutely dominating there. And FBI is a show that me and my family really like to watch together. Me and my mom tend to watch this one every Tuesday together, which is really nice. And then International, like I said, not as strong in my opinion. Some of the characters on this one just not as memorable or just not as exciting overall, but still a very, very solid entry in the FBI franchise. Depending on who you ask, this next show can either be one of the childhood favorites of theirs or one of the most infamous and awful things they've ever seen. It is Fear Factor here. I was not a Fear Factor guy growing up, and watching it back as an adult here was definitely not for me at all. I'm definitely on the camp of it just not being a very good show whatsoever. Of course, Joe Rogan hosting this one, and then later Ludacris from the reboot there that they did a few years back. And, if you're not familiar with it, it's essentially just these people doing these super outrageous challenges and these like stunts. Basically, they're like daring to drink like cow urine and shit and like eating like a bowl of spiders, or just these like crazy outlandish things. And that was the whole gimmick of it, right? Seeing what these people can do and how far they can push the envelope with these stunts and stuff. It is just like gross out humor. It's just not pleasant at all to watch, in my opinion. So definitely going to go in the bad tier. Fetch with Rough Men. Definitely getting a lot of cartoons so far in this batch here. And this is another one that is a childhood favorite of mine, going all the way up to the A1 tier here. Easily one that I watched a ton growing up on PBS Kids there. The host, he was animated Fetch, and then they had the human contestants go out and do essentially different challenges, and it was, you know, half educational and half entertainment, of course. But you know, they would go and see what it's like to be a you know, someone that works at NASA, or someone that works in you know, medicine, or someone that works in I don't know, like technologies with, you know, computers or something. And they kind of explore these different careers and, you know, what it's like to be someone in that field, and then kind of learn through their experience, which is really cool. So definitely has that educational side to it, as you can imagine, from PBS Kids, of course. But the humor on this one, the animation on this one, definitely top tier in my opinion. All things told, I'm going to say A1 tier here. I was pretty disappointed when it got canned, because I always thought it was very popular, but it ended after, I believe, 5 or 6 seasons, and then I remember just being kind of disappointed by that, because I really enjoyed the show. So as a kid, this was definitely one that I watched pretty religiously. So A1 tier it goes. Next up, Finding Bigfoot here. What a joke of a show, man. This is such a dumb idea for a show. Earlier in the series, I was talking about Destination Truth with Josh Gates, which is kind of the same idea, just hunting for these, you know, mythical creatures, these cryptoids like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, stuff like that. But this show only focuses on Bigfoot and Sasquatches specifically. And these people are just so freaking dumb, and they are just so out of their league here. You know, in the intro and stuff, it's claimed that these people have been researching Sasquatches for like 30 years, right? And they're these experts, and they know everything there is to know about Bigfoot. And some of the tactics they use in order to quote unquote find Bigfoot are just laughably stupid. Like, there was one episode I remember where, I shit you not, their whole tactic for trying to find Bigfoot in this one episode was to use a baby monitor, and to just have this baby monitor going off in the woods, and that was going to lure Bigfoot in, and they were going to find him on video. I just do not understand at all their reasoning behind that. You know, why they thought that was a good idea. In fact, my buddy Joe at work, we joke about this show all the time, because he's a big fan of Bigfoot. He is a believer in Bigfoot, as am I. And he's really into these types of shows where they go out and hunt for these types of creatures. And he's seen this, and he thinks it is one of the worst shows on TV, because he just does not understand their reasoning behind, you know, why they do what they do on the show. And I totally agree with him, because the show is just laughably stupid. So I'll put it in bed. It's not quite bottom of the barrel, because there is some stuff that, you know, it's like so bad it's good, you can kind of make fun of it at times. But even still, if you're trying to take it seriously, you can't do it whatsoever. Firefly here next up. Now, this one is definitely going to anger some commenters, but I'm going to say Firefly is pretty middle of the road here. I'm going to say Matt tier, because it's just not really my style. I like Nathan Fillion as an actor. He's definitely done some other work in some other dramas and sitcoms like Modern Family he was on that I thought was pretty solid. But for this particular role, for this particular style, you know, this kind of space, you know, opera, like sci-fi type of thing, just not really my cup of tea. So I'm going to say Matt here for Firefly. Fleabag, another one of the top 100 shows that I saw. I've seen some bits and pieces of this one online. I think also this one is pretty just average, middle of the road. Nothing against the actress. I think she does an all right job here, but just not really connecting with any of these characters. I think some of the bits just kind of go on for too long, and they don't really have, you know, any justification. You know, they don't really have a point, honestly. It's just kind of comedy for the sake of it, without really, you know, anything meaningful behind it. So for me, this one's just kind of average. Food Factory here. This is essentially Canadian Unwrapped here, and like Unwrapped, I do enjoy this one. I'm going to put this in good tier. It's not as, you know, like Unwrapped with Mark Summers has a lot more personality, a lot more, you know, kind of interesting, you know, sort of way it's presented and such. This is pretty just like standard, you know, like pretty by the book on how they kind of show off this machinery and how all this food, you know, comes to life and stuff. It's really fascinating, because the whole gimmick is they go to, like, you know, the Cheetos plant, they go to like Frito-Lay, or, you know, they see how they bottle Pepsi or something, and they'll show you, you know, the operations behind these, you know, snack foods and stuff. And it's really interesting to see these machines and just how they crank this stuff out like so quick, and, you know, the logistics of it all is really, really interesting to see. But just the presentation on this one is a little more bland than some of the shows that do this sort of same style. So for me, I'll put it in the good tier. Food Fighters here. Very underrated cooking competition show from NBC here. I think this one was on in like 2014 or so. It was like mid 2010s there. I'll put it in the great tier. It's kind of riding the line between great and A1 because the host on this one, Adam Richman, also was the host on Man vs. Food, and I'm a huge fan of him. But not quite as memorable as some of the other cooking shows here, so I'll put it in the great tier for now. But yeah, this was just very fun. It was a very simple idea. You had one chef go up against 5 different chefs, like professional chefs rather, in 5 different rounds, and for each one they would get a little bit tougher and tougher, and money would increase each time. And I think the grand prize, if you got everything, if you beat all the rounds and you won, the grand prize was $100,000. So a couple times they were able to do it, but yeah, definitely some serious competition there. But this is just pretty by the numbers. If you like cooking competitions like me, this is going to be right up your alley. If not, then not really something for you, and that's just totally fine. Next up here is Frasier. Now, Frasier is another one similar to Firefly that probably is going to anger some people in the comments, but again, I'm going to put this one in the meh tier. I think it's pretty overrated, honestly. I've never really been that big on Frasier. I really enjoyed Cheers. Cheers is a fantastic show. Love the cast on it. I think it's aged really well, but Frasier, I don't know, I just never really been a Kelsey Grammer kind of guy. I know that there's a reboot in the works as well that's been a big talking point for the last year or so. I think it's coming out later this year in 2022, and it should be on Paramount Plus, so we'll have to see how that does. But I know it has a huge fan base. One of my buddies from high school was a huge fan of Frasier, would always talk about it, and of course, if you have seen Binging with Babish, of course, you know that he's also a massive fan of Frasier, so it definitely has a pretty big community behind it, but I've just never been part of it. I think it's very, very overrated. Freaks and Geeks, on the other hand, I think is essential viewing for pretty much everybody here. I'm going to throw this one up in the A1 tier. This is just such a relatable show, man. Growing up in high school and kind of suburbia, it actually takes place in Michigan, which is where I'm from, so that's really cool to see. Very relatable in that respect, too. But you have 2 different, groups that it kind of focuses on, the geeks and the freaks, of course, hence the name. And just absolutely love it. The characters, the cast on this is phenomenal. So many people that would go on to have just huge careers later on in their acting career, like Seth Rogen and James Franco on this one. Linda Cardinelli, of course, as the lead here, just all do a phenomenal job here. And then, of course, it also was the main inspiration for the show Undeclared, which is very similar. It takes place in college, and some of the cast members from Freaks and Geeks were on Undeclared. I haven't seen that one, but I can definitely say Freaks and Geeks is essential. A huge thumbs up for me, A1 tier for sure. Following that, on the other hand, we go from one of the best to, again, one of the worst here. It's been a roller coaster ride, this tier list, and we have to crash down here with Fred the Show. Absolutely garbage, absolutely awful. Man, Nickelodeon, they have had some high highs and they have had some low lows, my friend. Fred is arguably the worst that they've ever had. I have seen certain lists out there of just like the worst TV shows, period, and they have Fred at the very top of that list, and I cannot deny it. This one is god awful. As well is Free Spirit here. If you saw the filmography filing, the How I Met Your Mother video that I posted here about a few months ago here, then you'll know Free Spirit, man, what an infamous show this one is. This is another one that's going in bottom of the barrel. I kind of jokingly say sometimes that this is one that you should check out just to see how bad it is, but if you're trying to take it seriously, you just can't. You just cannot take this one at all. Oh my god, it is just it's so cringeworthy for how awful some of these scenes are, and the plots, how they evolve and how they develop in the episode, just making no sense whatsoever. The one draw it has, at least for me, is Allison Hannigan. This was her first lead role from any show before she did Buffy or How I Met Your Mother. So interesting to see her on it, when she was so young, and seeing where she came from, which is cool. But outside of that, there was no redeeming positive traits with this one. It is just absolutely awful. Fresh off the boat here, another sitcom we have, this one from ABC in the mid-2010s as well. This one is tough because I've actually been rewatching this one quite a bit with my family. My mom is a massive fan of this show, And we recently got Hulu, and when she found out that Fresh Off the Boat was on it, she wanted to rewatch it. So me, her, and my brother Matt have all been rewatching it over the past couple months. And, honestly, I remember Fresh Off the Boat, the first season being really, really good. I really liked that first season. They did the voiceover. It fit in very well with the rest of the ABC shows around that time. It was paired with, Blackish, which made sense. It was paired with, American Housewife, which made sense. Obviously, Modern Family was part of that, but that was kind of always in its own different style. But when they removed the voiceover, season 2 onward, I think it's borderline unwatchable. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just so bad. Afterwards, like, I've been recently kind of, thinking about a list idea potentially of shows that had a huge drop off following their first season. And, in this sort of community, me and my friends on this channel, we've talked about this before, like a 13 Reasons Why potentially could definitely be up there. Honestly, Fresh Off the Boat might take that top spot because I think season 2 onward is just really, really bad. So all things considered, I'm going to put this in the meh tier. I don't think it's the worst show out there because that first season is pretty damn solid. But really after that, that's really all you need to see. I think that's the only essential viewing of it. And then as well, like a lot of the storylines too from season 2 onward just get so convoluted, just get so messy. There's so many additional characters they bring in, and by the time it ended, it was basically unrecognizable. It was just not the same show at all anymore. So it really jumped the shark. The only other thing I'll say about it is whenever people are like, oh, who are some characters, that should have gotten a spinoff, right? If you've ever heard people talk about this online or so, great shows that had really underrated characters that should have gotten their own series, following it. Honey and Marvin from Fresh Off the Boat. I think they definitely should have deserved their own spinoff. They were really funny together. If you know for sure. So all things considered, Fresh Off the Boat, middle of the road, kind of balancing those two extremes out. Next up here, Friday Night Lights, a classic sports drama here again from NBC in the 2000s. Definitely going a great tier here. Really don't need to say my piece on Friday Night Lights, as so many other people have said it before. Amazing casting, amazing acting. The story is phenomenal. Huge ensemble cast that all work well together, have great chemistry. I mean, the whole thing is just a perfect package put together there. Absolutely phenomenal show. So great tier. The only reason it's not higher is I haven't seen that much of it. Only a handful of episodes here, but this one definitely has a ton of potential to move up for me. Next up here, Friends from College, probably the most middle of the road show I've ever seen. This is another one that the meh tier was birthed to house here because there are some episodes that are absolutely phenomenal that, will have you laughing the whole way through, just rolling on the floor. And then there are some episodes that just have you bored to tears, man, that just have nothing of value at all in the 25 minutes or so. The cast is absolutely phenomenal. This is arguably the best cast ever put together on TV. You have Kobe Smulders, you have Keegan-Michael Key, you have Fred Savage, you have tons of great guest stars like Kate McKinnon from SNL is in it, and she has a super, super memorable role. That's definitely one of the episodes where you'll be rolling for sure. But I mean, outside of that, there just really isn't that much here to really hook you in, unless you are watching it for the cast, which is understandable. I mean, otherwise, this is a pretty forgettable show. It definitely didn't make that big of an impact for Netflix, or only had 2 seasons, so it doesn't really have a huge place in pop culture going forward, unlike some of their other sitcoms. So there's really no reason, unless you're watching it for the cast, to check it out, in my opinion. So all things considered, just pretty average, middle of the road, meh tier for sure. Friends here. This one is also quite polarizing. There's definitely a lot of people that love Friends and a lot of people that dislike Friends. I think there is kind of a misconception, at least for my channel, that I don't like Friends. That's not necessarily true. I do think that it's a decent show, so I'll put it in the good tier, but it is just incredibly overhyped. So like, if this show hadn't gotten sort of the reception it did and it wasn't considered one of the best, then it would probably be pretty high for me, because I do think it is well written and, well acted and such, but just the amount of people that come, just absolutely defending this one to high heaven is just absolutely insane to me. I mean, I can appreciate it that, it got like the second highest rating on the top 100 list and such. That's a huge accomplishment for sure, but for me at least, it just never was warranted that sort of level of success, that level of, appreciation from the fandom. When you look at the live ratings from back when it was airing and such, like the finale and stuff, that had over like 50 million viewers. It's one of the highest rated finales of all time. And I don't know if it really deserved that level of success given the quality of it. So it's a good show, but it's just extremely overhyped is my piece on it. So I'll say good tier with Friends. Full House here, kind of another one that's in that same lane, but I'm gonna go meh tier with it. Never really connected with this one all that much. I know a lot of people my age at least grew up with it on Nick at Night. Was a big sort of syndicated network where they played a lot of these older 80s and 90s sitcoms, and Full House was one of their tent poles that they had for a long time there. But for me, I just never really connected with it. Like I said, I think some of the characters are kind of annoying, honestly. Definitely rest in peace Bob Saget for sure. I mean, he was a great actor from the show. Of course, John Stamos as Uncle Jesse, probably my favorite character on the show. Very memorable. But other than that, not too much to offer here in my opinion. Another one I think is pretty overhyped. Next up is Funny You Should Ask. And speaking of overhyped, man, this show has to be one of the worst panel game shows of all time. This might be the worst game show of all time. We haven't seen that many terrible game shows here yet. Most of the stuff in the bottom of the barrel tier, sitcoms and such. But Funny You Should Ask, man, terrible, absolutely awful show, man. I mean, rest in peace to Louis Anderson. That is, I mean, for sure, that's like genuinely warranted and such. But outside of that, that is like the only positive thing I can say about this show is that he was part of it, because every single aspect to it is just horribly cringy. It's essentially like Hollywood Squares, if you've ever seen that, where they have a group of contestants, or a group of celebrities rather, and then two contestants playing, and the host, Byron Allen, will ask, someone, it'll be like a true or false question, essentially, and it'll be like, is the planet Mars the, fourth planet from, Earth or something, or from the sun, and, if it's true or false, they'll have to give an answer, and then if the celebrities agree with them or not, that's how they win. So, but like the whole thing, they're just cracking just these horribly cringy jokes, and the way it's paced and stuff is just so awful. It's really something that's hard to describe, because it's such a level of bad that you can't, like accurately give a description of it without someone seeing it for themselves. Like it's such a low that it's just hard to even, understand how bad it really is. So that's my piece on it. But yeah, definitely bottom of the barrel, just absolutely awful game show. Futurama, on the other hand, not too bad. Actually pretty good, in my opinion. I'm going to say it definitely rides the line between good and great for me, but because I haven't seen that much of it, I'll put it in just the good tier. Most of the animated adult cartoons probably are going to ride in that good tier, because most of them are solid enough, but they'll never hit the same heights as like a Simpsons or a Family Guy or South Park or something like that. And I think Futurama kind of has that problem, because obviously Matt Groening, I mean, he just hit such a high with the Simpsons. It's really hard to top that. And so Futurama definitely suffers a little bit from that, but even still, it definitely holds its own. It's certainly very unique for a comedy, having like that sort of futuristic, aspect to it, and having some of those references in it is a lot of fun. So overall, I'll say good tier, I think is fair for Futurama. Following this one, another polarizing one, we have Game of Thrones here. Some people absolutely love this, think it's one of the best shows of all time. Some people, like my brother Matt, cannot stand it, had to walk away after 10 minutes. And then some people think it was incredible up until the finale, of course, which just absolutely undermined and ruined the show for some people. For me, based on what I've seen, I'm going to put it in the great tier. I think that's fair. I think it's a proper compromise, all things told, based on everyone else's opinion. The thing is, like, fantasy in general is going to be pretty polarizing, because it just doesn't really hit for everybody. For me, sci-fi fantasy can kind of get the theme that it's pretty hit or miss for me with most of these shows. And, Game of Thrones, there were some aspects to it that I just, wasn't a huge fan of from what I've seen, but there were definitely, some great action moments, and I think the acting is really, really good on the show. They definitely picked, pretty high profile actors for these roles that really fit them very well. Peter Dinklage, of course, probably the most famous actor from the show, and I think he does a really, really good job here. But definitely some aspects that, turn you off from the show as well. A lot of the, sex and sort of the assaults and the rapes on the show, that definitely is a turn off for me, because that's just too real sometimes. You don't want to see that when you're trying to just watch TV and have a good time, and then you see something like that and just kind of ruins the episode or so. So that's probably the biggest criticism I have for it. But other than that, I would say it's a pretty phenomenal show there, so I'm gonna go great tier. Game Shakers here. Oh man, Dan Schneider back at it again. We have so many Dan Schneider shows because I've practically seen all of them, and I think Game Shakers is pretty underrated. I'm gonna go good tier. It's definitely not in the same league as like a Drake and Josh or iCarly or something like that. But for late era Dan Schneider, I mean post like Henry Danger rather, this is actually pretty solid. This is something that I could enjoy if I wanted to. Kel Mitchell, of course, from Good Burger and all that, is the legacy actor here, and he is phenomenal on the show. I mean, who doesn't love Kel Mitchell, All in all, I mean, the storyline is pretty creative. A bunch of these middle schoolers start a video game company, and, hijinks ensue, essentially. But I think that's a pretty solid premise, especially for kids. And this is something that, like, if it came out when I was a kid and at the height of an iCarly or a Drake and Josh or something when I was in middle school, I would have been all over this. This would have been my favorite show on TV. So maybe I'm a little old for it now, but all things considered, I mean, for a late era Dan Schneider, it's pretty solid. So I'd say give this one a chance if you're curious. I'd say good tier is fair. Next up, Game Theory here. We have all of the theorist channels on this tier list here. Of course, Matt Pat and his YouTube career having a bunch of different game theory and the spin-off channels, of course, film theory and food theory we'll talk about a little bit later here. I'm going to say for game theory specifically, I'll go great tier. It's not something I watch too much nowadays, but in its prime, it was absolutely phenomenal, man. There were so many good videos and so many interesting theories about different games. I usually watch, Nintendo-based ones because that's what I played growing up. But there's just so many, so much variety on this one for sure. And then he does a lot of YouTube sort of, topics and YouTube videos regarding, the policies and sort of the politics and some of the controversies on the website, which is pretty interesting just, out of principle. If you're on YouTube like me and you want to, stay up to date with what's going on, then that's a really good source for you to find that info. So he does a really good job breaking that down for sure. So all things told, I'm going to go great tier. Next up is Genius Junior here. This is a talent show hosted by Neil Patrick Harris here. This was pretty short-lived. I think it was only on for a single season, actually. And this is something that I probably should have talked about in filing filmographies, but I just didn't really have much to say on this one because this one is pretty forgettable. I'm going to go bad tier. Just not really that memorable at all, aside from Neil Patrick Harris. There were a few of these shows like that kind of sprung up around the time this was on. Like Little Big Shots was another one where it was basically just a talent show, but it was kids, and it was just showing off, that they could sing or, comedy or whatever. And with this one, they were all super smart. So they would, do trivia and such, and that was their talent. And I don't know, it just gets kind of formulaic and repetitive after a while. We talked about earlier, like, America's Got Talent, just to kind of compare to something like that. That show has a lot of cliches and a lot of tropes that you're going to see pretty much pop up on every talent show that just get really old really fast. Actually watching the people perform is fun, but the backstories and, everyone's doing it for someone in their family, right? Because their family passed away from cancer 10 years prior to it. It's just the same tropes over and over again. So I don't know, all the talent shows kind of feel like they're in the same boat for me. So, but this one just being as unmemorable as it is and just kind of as, middle of the road as it is, I'm going to put it in the bad tier. George Shrinks here, another classic cartoon from my childhood here. Didn't watch this one all that much growing up. Most of the Treehouse shows, like between this and Berenstain Bears and Max and Ruby, Berenstain Bears was always my top favorite of those. So with this one, though, I will say good tier. A couple of memorable stories in this one, but just not something I come back to all that much nowadays. George Lopez here, another one that similar to Full House, I think a lot of people my age watched on Nick at Night and sort of in syndication there. I do think it's a little bit stronger than Full House, so I'll put it in the one tier above it. I'll say good tier here, but this is another one that I just don't really come back to much nowadays. This is just kind of like a product of its time, very 2000s-esque, multicam, has the laugh track style. Of course, everyone knows the theme song is probably the most memorable part about this show, but outside of that, nothing that's really going to stand out or stick with you all that much. Get Out Alive with Bear Grylls. He did a few of these types of shows where he had like celebrities or different contestants that he'd kind of follow along, and he'd take out to the wilderness or the mountains or whatever, and he'd kind of show them the great outdoors, and just kind of using his tactics and his survival skills to make it through the night or whatever. I'll put it in the good tier rather. Had some memorable moments, but Bear Grylls is kind of a controversial guy because there's been some instances of him allegedly at least kind of like, instead of camping out in the woods, he'll camp out at a Motel 6, they have hotels and stuff, and some people have called him a poser and shit like that. I don't know if any of that's really valid because I honestly don't really care that much, but entertainment value, if we're just judging on that, I'd say it's a pretty decent show. Guy's Grocery Games here, a Food Network competition show hosted by, of course, Guy Fieri here. I enjoyed this show. I'm going to put it in the good tier, matching with the G's, of course. Got to keep the alliteration going. It's not as strong as like Chopped or something, because that's like very much like about the cooking itself. That's food focused. This is a little bit more on like the gimmicks of it and the judges, the celebrity sort of faces they'll have pop up on the show. And so that kind of takes away some of the value of just watching these people and their skills just flat out with what they can do as far as their cooking goes. Kind of has some of those more gimmicky elements to it. And then it also kind of takes inspiration from Supermarket Sweep, being set in a grocery store and having to run around and get your ingredients and stuff. It has some parallels to that, which is kind of funny. But all things told, not a terrible show. I do wish that they didn't play it as much as they did, because that's kind of another strike against it. This is one that kind of follows in the footsteps of like a Teen Titans Go for Cartoon Network, or SpongeBob for Nickelodeon, and that this is one that Food Network just plays constantly all the time. This and Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives and Beat Bobby Flare are like the only 3 shows they play anymore. So that, like I said, that's kind of another negative against it, but all in all, still a decent show at the end of the day. Next up, we have Ghost Whisperer here, a drama that we've talked about quite a bit on this channel before, in the tournament and then in the pilot project as well. Jennifer Love Hewitt, of course, the lead on this show. I'm going to say good tier. I'm not as big on it as some people I know, like Steph is definitely a huge fan of this show, has the DVD collection, binged through the entire show multiple times, so she's definitely more of an expert than I am with this one, but from the handful of episodes I've seen, not terrible. There's a network called Start TV that we get. It's another syndicated network, and they play a lot of just like these sort of 2000s dramas that heavily feature women in the lead roles, and kind of targeting that female demographic. And my mom watches it every once in a while, and she's starting to watch Ghost Whisperer now because they play it quite a bit. So that's cool. It definitely has a lot of those elements to it that I think more women are going to be interested in seeing. It kind of has those storylines, kind of has like a soap opera feel to it at times. So that's definitely going to be, more female oriented. So maybe not something that's going to target me specifically, but all in all, still, I think a good show at the end of the day there. Ghosts here. This one is definitely more than a good show. This is a phenomenal show, let me tell you. Easily one of the best comedies of the year here. This one climbing up the ladder, going all the way to the A1 tier here. If this, hits a home run with season 2, this honestly could go down as one of the best comedies from this decade. There's already a few contenders out there. I mean, Abbott Elementary, you guys know I am rooting for 100% here. I think that is going to be the one that kind of, defines the 2020s as like the comedy show of the decade rather. But Ghost definitely has potential to do it. Taken after the BBC show of the same name, it's definitely a remake, so that's going to turn some people off from it just out of principle, which is understandable. But For me at least, man, they just do so much with this storyline, and so many of the characters are super memorable here. Like, there's so much diversity in the cast, which is great. Just super, super funny show, man. For a comedy, I mean, that's exactly what you want, right? You want to be entertained, you want to laugh, you just want to forget about your problems, and that's exactly what this show does. So really can't say anything bad about it in that regard. A1 tier for sure is where it goes. Giada at Home here, another cooking show here. Giada De Laurentiis hosting this one, pretty famous in celebrity food culture and celebrity chef culture. I'm gonna put this one in it's kind of between Matt and good. I'll put it up in good. That's fine because I did watch it quite a bit growing up. It's another just basic stand and stir show on Food Network. There's definitely some criticisms that you can have with it, and just the sense that it's not really that flashy. It's very just vanilla. It's pretty basic, pretty bland at times. It definitely focuses on the food first, which is nice. Her personality is pretty subtle, so that doesn't contrast too much. But you wish she was a little more outgoing, a little more charismatic at times. So that's my only real kind of criticism with it. But I'd say good tier overall. Gilligan's Island here, a classic from the 60s for a reason. I'm going to put this one up in the great tier. I really enjoy Gilligan's Island. This is one that we have on at work quite a bit. It's either buzzer with those classic game shows like Match Game and Family Feud, sometimes it'll be on, or it's this other channel called MeTV, which we get here in Detroit, which is a syndicated network which just has a lot of these classic sitcoms from the 70s and the 60s, even earlier than that at times. And they play Gilligan's Island quite a bit on there. So sometimes at work, I'll see it. We have it on, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, this is a classic. I mean, really one of those shows that really took the comedy, sort of genre and leveled it up a little bit from back in the day. Because beforehand, it was just very basic, at-home situational comedy. Here, you got all these people and they're stranded on a desert island, and so it has a little bit more stakes to it. It kind of has some dramatic elements at times, which is really interesting, especially, again, for its time. Really wasn't a lot of shows doing something like that. So just for how influential it was alone, definitely got to go great tier. Gilmore Girls here, another one we got to go up with the great tier for. Arguably the WB's best show that they ever made, up there with Buffy for sure for some of their best dramas. The two leads here absolutely work so well together, great chemistry, very memorable, all around. Really can't say anything bad about it. Again, I got to go great tier with it. Good Morning America here. This is another one that I watched quite a bit growing up, and now it's not really something I would tune into all that much anymore because I just try to avoid the news, honestly. It's the only morning news show that I saw back in the day, or that I was willing to watch, because I just really don't like the Today Show at all. I don't even have it on this list because I just haven't seen enough of it really to really get a full glimpse of what the show is really about. But Good Morning America, at least I like the cast on it. I think Robin Roberts is great, and for me, George Stephanopoulos is top tier when it comes to any news anchor. He's probably the best news anchor of all time, in my opinion. So all in all, I'll put it in good tier. Of course, matching good, so gotta go with there. But yeah, like I said, I just don't really watch the news all that much anymore. Just for me, TV now is I get away from the news. I see that online, or I'll hear about it from people, and I just want to come to TV and just laugh, or get sucked into a drama and just escape. So the idea of watching the news on TV is just a total farce to me now. So but for its prime, I'll put it in the good tier. Good Mythical Morning here, Rhett and Link's morning show that they do on YouTube here. I'm a big Rhett and Link guy, so this is definitely one that I've seen quite a bit of. It's kind of between good and great for me. Another one that I don't really watch all that much of. Yeah, I guess we'll go good tier. That's fair, because I don't think I really watched much of it in the past year or so. I gotta be honest. A lot of what they do now, from what it looks like, is a lot of food-based stuff. So you'd think I'd be all over it, but just don't really have that much interest in it. There's a lot of content that they push out. If you're tapped into their main channel and then their side channel to Good Mythical More, then you get 2 videos every single day. So that's a lot to keep up with, and I just don't really have that time or that patience to get through all of that. So I just haven't really seen that much of it recently. But in its prime, when I was watching a few years ago, I mean, they were fantastic. They have great chemistry. They have some really interesting co-hosts. Sometimes they'll bring special guests on. On Jimmy Fallon's show, actually, they've done a few segments when they've been guests on his show, and they've kind of copy and pasted some of the segments they do on the real show with Jimmy Fallon. That's really fun to see, kind of get a different perspective on it. So all in all, I'll say good tier. It's just not something I come back to nowadays, but definitely for its prime, it was a lot of fun. Good Eats here with Alton Brown, my arch nemesis. Now, maybe not that dramatic, but I do not like Alton Brown whatsoever. I think he's a total hypocrite. I do not support him whatsoever anymore. But Good Eats, I can't really say anything bad about the show itself because it was pretty fascinating for its time. It's very much like educational first. I mean, it's very tapped into like the science of the food and like the chemistry behind it. It's kind of like America's Test Kitchen in that way, and it kind of has some of those elements where you're seeing it in a different perspective. It's not just about the food on the surface. It really goes deep into sort of the biology and such behind it, which is kind of interesting, but sometimes it can be a little much to take in. But like I said, I just don't really like Alton Brown at all anymore. I just don't support him because he is not a fan of food culture. Like he's not a fan of food media. He doesn't like reality competitions. He doesn't like what is it, like speed eating or like competitive eating, which I love, as I talked about earlier. And I just think that's totally hypocritical because he made his name through reality TV. He hates competition shows, but his first major gig on Food Network was Iron Chef America, which was one of their biggest shows. So, and it's one of those shows also where you want to talk about, competitive eating and stuff. In his mind, it's wasteful and such. Iron Chef America would literally have a whole fucking bench worth of one ingredient, and they wouldn't even use it all. So where does all that shit go? They're not feeding everybody like that. I promise you, they're throwing food away on every single one of those shows. So I don't know. To me, he just comes off really entitled. Like, I don't support him at all anymore. But, in his prime, if we're just judging the merits of the show, I think it's a good show, but I just don't like the host of it. Good Girls, another one of these dramas here from NBC this time. I've talked about it in the past for sure. I do like this show. I just didn't really have that much. I don't know what it was. After a while, I just got kind of bored with it. It didn't necessarily, dip in quality, but there were just other things that caught my attention. I just never really bothered to go back and see it. But I did hear at least that season 4, which was the final season, really dipped in quality, like really became really bad. So but that's just speculation I've heard. I haven't actually seen it for myself, but from what I remember from the show, I did really enjoy it. I love the cast on the show. You have Christina Hendricks, you have Retta from Parks and Rec is one of the leads, which is really funny. Reno Wilson is one of the leads, and he's from Mike and Molly, which you guys know is one of my favorite sitcoms. So a lot of big names on it. So that's always great to see. But yeah, I'll say great tier because at its peak it was really solid, but there's just not really a lot for me to go back to. I guess there's just more shows that I think are a little bit more fascinating or that have caught my attention since I've seen this one, and there's just not really a lot of reason for me to go back and catch up with Good Girls. So great tier is where it's going to go. Good Sam here. Man, bad tier for sure. I mean, I'm not really a medical guy, and not really big on the medical shows, and this is one of the recent ones that, supports that argument once again, even though I do really enjoy Sophia Bush, who is the lead on this one and should be way better than she is, but just can't really hold this performance down. It's one of those things where it's like, I really wanted to support it because I like, the cast on it, I like Sophia Bush and such, and it looked like CBS was really trying hard with this one. They really wanted this one to be a success. They were very ballsy putting it up against Chicago PD, which ultimately backfired on them. But, I appreciate that sort of commitment to it, and they really heavily, marketed this one, and it really looks like it could have been something good. And then it just came out and it was so cliche and it was so trope filled, and like every single element to it was something you've seen before done way better on a billion other shows. And the cast didn't really have a lot of chemistry. It just felt really bland. It felt pretty just middle of the road, just like stale. Nothing unique about it that says, oh, that's from Good Sam. You could point to any other billion medical shows out there and you could find the exact same story arcs, the exact same character archetypes there. There's just nothing that stands out with this one. So bad tier for me. Just very, very sick of talking about this one too, because I've mentioned it so many times before. Just not really a good show. Next up is Goosebumps here. This is a classic from me and Matt's childhood, of course. We read these books growing up, but we had a bunch of Goosebumps DVDs growing up, so we got to put this one high for nostalgia alone. Definitely great tier for this one. R.L. Stine, man, what a legend for sure in the children's, literary sort of community there. But yeah, great adaptation for sure. I think this is just like one of a few different versions of Goosebumps. This is one from the 90s, but I think there has been, a couple remakes or a couple that have kind of sprung up over the years, potentially in different countries as well, because it's just such a big, name and such a big franchise. So, but this is definitely one of the OG ones from the 90s there, and it's one of my favorites, as you can tell. Grace Under Fire here, Chuck Lorre sitcom. This one is also pretty solid here. I'm going to put this in good tier. I don't, watch it as much as some of his others, like The Big Bang Theory or Dharma and Greg or something like that. But this one is pretty memorable for what it is. Pretty basic at its core. Just a single mom and her two kids just kind of navigating day-to-day lives, and hijinks ensue, right? So it doesn't really have like the most unique or creative plot out there, but it does a lot with the little that it is given. It can do a lot really well, and come off very creative in that regard. So I'll put it in good tier for that. Grand Crew, another one that I'm just so sick of talking about, man. I've mentioned this in so many videos. I've seen, pretty much the entire show at this point just out of necessity because I have mentioned it so much. And there's nothing interesting about it. There's just nothing that stands out about this. It's literally that basic archetype of a bunch of 20-year-olds living in the big city, navigating their way through life, how many times have I mentioned that, it's just so, there's so many shows that try to replicate, the success of something else, like a Friends or a Will and Grace, but it's not even just in this, genre or style. There's so many, dramas that do it, so many animated shows that do it, and it's just like, why do you think that I would choose to watch something like this when Friends or How I Met Your Mother already exists? It's not that the show is necessarily bad, but just in comparison, like, we're doing here on this tier list, why would I rank this anywhere close to those? Because those were the archetypes, those were the ones that came before that kind of paved the way for a show like this. So, by comparison, this just feels very empty. There's just nothing of substance here, is kind of the best way I can describe it. So for me, it's just very average, very middle of the road, trying to, reach for something bigger than it really deserves. Next up here, Grandfather. This is an interesting show. Kind of been rewatching this little by little here. I did watch it when it was new, when it came out in 2015, and then a few years went by, and kind of slowly but surely seen some of the episodes pop up here and there. Of course, the big draw, at least for me, is Josh Peck, because Drake and Josh, of course, one of my childhood favorites there. But you're really watching this for John Stamos, for sure. He is the star here. If you're a fan of him on Full House or any of the other shows that he's done, you're gonna like him here. He plays that very kind of self-righteous character at the beginning, but he sort of grows and he sort of learns to be a little less selfish and be a little more outgoing with other people as the series progresses. So he kind of has a nice development there. And then Josh Peck plays his son, and he has a daughter. Josh Peck has a daughter, and then that's John Stamos' granddaughter. So that's kind of what the beginning of the series is. In the first episode, they're kind of reunited there. And then they have to, come to terms with the fact that they're, a family and they haven't seen each other for, decades and such. So it's a really, so in that regard, I think it can be a very relatable show to a lot of people, which is nice. And it also has some of those more emotional connections and emotional moments that'll kind of bridge it all together. But if you are in the Drake and Josh community and you are watching this for Josh Peck, then you've definitely seen The Biter, the episode where Drake Bell guest stars on it, and there's some in-jokes there, which is one of the things I wanted to talk about on it, because I've been rewatching Drake and Josh quite a bit, and just been seeing a lot of like documentaries and a lot of like kind of video essays and such talking about the series and how it's progressed afterwards. And it's interesting because those two haven't really spoken all that much since Drake and Josh. I mean, they really weren't as close as you would believe based on how they act on the show. And this is one of the few instances where they've actually done a project like this together on screen since Drake and Josh came out. And that was in, this show was made in 2015, so almost a decade since Drake and Josh ended in 2007. And it's fun to see Drake Bell on here. Obviously, it's kind of cool for the novelty of it. Definitely some in-jokes, like I said, that are pretty nostalgic in that regard. But as a whole, this show is just kind of, at the end of the day, it's just a John Stamos vehicle, and at least for me, like I said earlier with Full House, I'm just not really that big on him all that much. Just kind of average in that regard. So I think it's a decent show, but it kind of suffers from the fact that it didn't really have a vision clear from the beginning, and it just didn't really know how to take these two completely different characters and these two different stars and kind of mesh them all together. It had good intentions, but it just didn't really execute it all that well. Next up here, we have Gravity Falls here. Matt would be very upset with me if I didn't put this one at least in the great tier, so I'm going to put it up there. I've only seen the pilot episode, so I can't really judge it too much off of that, but I think that pilot episode is pretty spectacular, I must say. And for Disney, this is definitely one of those shows that I would come back to, I think more so than most of the others that they've had, especially more of the cartoons that he has definitely steered me away from. That he's like, no, don't watch these. They're not bad. Trust me on that. And watch Gravity Falls instead. So I'll take his word on it. Gravity Falls, definitely a thumbs up from me. The Great Chocolate Showdown here. This is another cooking show. This one is from Canada here, and it was actually syndicated this year in the winter 2022 on the CW. So that's how I saw it. I'm gonna go Matt here with it. I mean, it's just a pretty by the numbers baking show, cooking competition. So again, if that's your thing, you'll probably enjoy it at least a little bit. If it's not really your thing, then, you can pass on it for sure. The only reason I wanted to watch it was one of the judges, and I believe the host as well, Anna Olsen, was a celebrity chef that I watched a lot growing up, and her show, Fresh with Anna Olsen, was syndicated here in the U.S. when I was a teen, and I watched quite a bit of that. So that was cool to see. I don't really think she's done that much, since then, and that was back in like the early 2010s or so. So it's been quite a while. But yeah, this was kind of her comeback show essentially, and I think it's okay, but it's just not really something that I would watch all that much again in comparison to other baking shows or other cooking shows that are out there. So it's kind of my piece on it. Grey's Anatomy, kind of another one in that regard where it's just kind of meh here. I respect Grey's Anatomy for sure because it is definitely, longest running of any medical show out there, and it has its place in dramatic TV, and it has its place in TV in general, as just, a springboard for all these people's careers, and Shonda Rhimes as well, and her, huge development as a creator, doing Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder and Bridgerton, and all those great dramas that she's done in the past 10 years or so. I mean, obviously a huge thanks to Grey's Anatomy for helping her get there, but just, again, judging it on its own merits, it's a pretty by-the-numbers medical drama, and that's just not really my style. I can appreciate people that enjoy it, but it's just not for me, So, as simple as that, really. Grounded for Life here, another one that I'm just so over talking about, and there are some aspects to the show that I think are okay. Actually, you know what? No, I'm being too hard on it. Let's put it in at least the Met tier, because I do like the cast on the show. But yeah, this is another one that just is in the overrated category for me. It's just extremely, it's just wild to me that there are so many people that claim that this is their favorite childhood show of all time. Like, over any cartoon, over anything on Nickelodeon, anything on Disney, like this show, you know, a knockoff Walmart version of Malcolm in the Middle is your favorite childhood show. That blows my mind. And it's like not just a couple isolated instances. I mean, a lot of people out there hold that opinion, which is insane to me. So, yeah, for that, I just can't really get over, you know, how big it is. Again, just not really warranted given its quality, but there are a couple positive aspects about it. So maybe I'm a little too harsh on it, but I'll go Met tier. You know, we'll balance out, we'll compromise here. Met tier is fair, but as a whole, you can just tell this is just not one that I come back to at all. Gus Johnson here. Ooh, polarizing for sure. Listen, I never really watched him. I shouldn't say that. I was never really that impressed by him prior to his incident, to his controversy, and then just really did not care for him much after that. But again, judging on his content, I'll just say Met tier because it's fine. It's just basic sketch comedy. It's just basic satire. It's nothing that's like incredibly amazing, you know, not like you can get elsewhere, but it's not like you'd regret watching it either because they're pretty short. I mean, most of his videos are under a minute, so you know it's a fucking TikTok, you know, length that you're watching it for. But yeah, you know, I won't go into his controversy and shit, but yeah, that was a turning point for him. A lot of people turned on him. He lost a lot of respect, rightfully so, and that was a hard pill for some people to swallow, understandably. So for that, I mean, you can't really put him up that high because morally he's just not a good person, and it's not like, you know, like a Danny Masterson, for example, where you know, he's playing a character and then he's got his, you know, real person, you know, in the real world and stuff, and you can kind of, you know, separate those two. With this, it's like, you know, Gus Johnson, it's him, it's, you know, his channel, it's, you know, his name is being bared there, so it's kind of hard to look past it, you know what I mean, more so than like a traditional format on TV would be. So but yeah, I'm gonna go Met tier with him. Hannibal here, another one that might put me in hot water, but I'm going Hannibal is Met tier, guys. It's just I don't know, man. I'm not really that big on like psychological horror or anything, so maybe it's just not for me. You know, I can understand, I guess, why some people would enjoy it. If you have more patience than me, you know, when it comes to this stuff, if you really like a slow burner type of show, I could see why this would be, you know, something you would gravitate towards. But for me, I like really snappy, you know, quick style. If it's a drama, you know, it's got to have some action, it's got to have some energy to it. And this whole, you know, from what I've seen, the whole show is just slow, man. It has just no movement to it at all, and that's just not something I can really hang with when it comes to dramas. So for me, just gonna go Met tier. Harold and the Purple Crayon, on the other hand, this show is fantastic, man. This is one of those recommendations that I got from Matt here as like one of the most underrated, overlooked, you know, animated shows out there, and he's like, you gotta check this out, you gotta check it out. So finally did for my pilot project, and absolutely blew me away, man. This is a terrific show. I mean, it's HBO for one, which is, you know, you're gonna get quality with HBO, but you think HBO does, you know, very adult, very mature, you know, The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, The Wire, you know, got that grit to it. But this is just super lively and colorful, and, you know, it's just very imaginative, and it's for preschoolers, you know, and that's a totally different ballgame for HBO to play, and they absolutely nailed this one. So hats off to HBO, man. Like, they can literally do any genre, and it probably is going to be a home run for them. So absolutely fantastic. Yeah, A1 tier for sure. Moving on from that, Hawaii Five-0 here. Blah. This is the remake here. I've actually never seen the original, surprisingly, even though it is one of the most famous cop dramas of all time. But I've seen the remake here, and this is very much just like CBS drama. I mean, that's like every CBS kind of police procedural action show, with the exception of the FBI's, because those are Dick Wolf, so that kind of has a different element to it. But anything else that's like produced under Paramount, you know, CBS wise, just feels so like just vanilla and cliche, and you know, it'll serve you about 5 minutes worth of entertainment throughout a 45-minute episode, right? There's about 5 minutes worth of content actually caring about, and the other 40 is just total garbage and total filler, right? Is kind of the best way I can describe it. I mean, it just drags on. It drags on so fucking much, and I don't know, man. There's nothing here that's interesting. You know, there's nothing, and no characters, no dialogue, nothing that'll grab you, nothing that'll stick with you. So nothing positive to really say about it. I'm gonna go bad tier. Hell's Kitchen here. Gordon Ramsay's show, of course, one of his OG shows that he really got big off of, and that really opened a lot of doors for him. I'm gonna say good tier. I used to be much bigger on Hell's Kitchen, but after a while it just became, you know, pretty formulaic, pretty repetitive. It's like you have the contestants, and the drama is the thing that will, you know, be the draw with this show. And like, again, for me, if it's a cooking show, you want to focus in on the food. You want to see the food first. You want to see just the raw talent and skill of these people and what they can do. And this just had a lot of those gimmicky elements to it that just weren't really that interesting. And the fact that it's been on for as long as it is, it's kind of like a good thing and a bad thing, because it's impressive just on a principle standpoint that it's gone on for, you know, almost 20 years now. But the fact that every season is like basically the same thing with no variation. I mean, the idea of like binge watching the entire series from start to finish, even someone like me who loves cooking shows would get really sick of that really fast. So, you know, it kind of is a double-edged sword there. But all things told, at its peak, when I was really into it, it was a good show. So I'll put it at least in the good tier. High School Bowl here. Oh man, what a discovery with this one. Well, here's the thing. Objectively, this is a bad show, but because of like the circumstance, because it's like so local and, you know, it's so low budget, I'm gonna give it some slack. I'm gonna put it at least in meh, because, you know, judging it comparably to like any of these other shows on like a production standpoint would not be fair, because this is like as local as you can get. I don't even think this airs like anywhere else, so this is a Michigan exclusive here you're seeing. But it's exactly what it sounds like. It's high schoolers in a trivia bowl, and you know, it's just trivia. That's pretty much all it is. It's weird because like we get a lot of local syndicated stations here that play, you know, national shows in syndication naturally, or, you know, there'll be local stuff, but it'll be, you know, it'll be like PBS, right? So it'll be local, but it'll play on different affiliates, you know, all throughout the country. But this show is exclusive to just the state of Michigan here, and so it's really specifically only designed for like one specific station, which is this Michigan Learning Channel we get. And the shows on there, they're all like this. Like every single series that station holds is exactly like this, in that it's so low budget and the production is so trashy. It's not even public access. It's like lower than public access, which is insane. Which is like there's a bar below it. But anyway, so the host here has no dynamic, no personality whatsoever. The contestants are just high schoolers, so they're awkward as hell, you know, and they're, you know, they're shy, they're coy, you know, they're not super outgoing. I mean, they're trivia bowl contestants, so they're geeks, you know, they're fucking nerds, you know, that's what it is. Hilda here, another one of Matt's favorites, understandably so, because in my eyes, this is pretty much just a Gravity Falls ripoff from the very start of it. So I'll put it in the same tier as Gravity Falls. I mean, it's not quite to that level, obviously, but it does exactly what you expect it to do. It does exactly what you want it to do. It has those fantasy elements. It has, you know, very similar animation style to it. It was actually produced by Netflix, which is quite interesting, because I don't think they do a lot of animation stuff. They're usually known for, again, their dramas and such, but they really did this one well, so that's very impressive. You know, totally going out of their comfort zone, out of the style that they are familiar with, and really, really impressing a lot of people who stick to that style like Matt does with his cartoons naturally. So all things considered, I think great tier is definitely fair there. Hill Street Blues here, another classic police procedural show. I'm going to put this one up in the good tier. It's definitely pretty dated at times, and the first season I've mentioned in some of the past is like pretty gritty, hardcore. It really throws you into the deep end, and there's a lot of things surrounding it that you just kind of have to get past in order to get to the good stuff. But once you're there, you can definitely enjoy it for sure. It has a lot of really interesting, tropes and such that were birthed out of Hill Street Blues. This is definitely one of those shows that was like one of the first to do a lot of the classic police style, cliches and such, and really was very inventive, very new at the time. And definitely gave way to pretty much every other police drama that was on TV in the last 40 years since this one has come out. So definitely got to give props there at least. Honest Trailers here, another YouTube show. I'll put this one in the good tier. Makes me laugh every once in a while. It's not something I watch all the time because I don't really pay attention to movies or whatever's going on with films or anything, but every once in a while when a big one comes out and they do an honest trailers for it, it can be pretty funny, so I'll put it in the good tier. Hoarders here, and Matt has introduced me to some weird ass shows, and let me tell you, this is one of them because it can be interesting at times. That I can understand why this has an audience, recognize it as such, but there are some instances and some episodes where it's just like you want to distance yourself as far away as you can from this. Because you don't want to see a guy carefully filling up his bathtub with shit and piss so that doesn't overflow because he hoards his own urine and feces and he can't let it go. And that's when you know you're like, why are we showing this? Why are we using these people for entertainment? It's just so icky and gross. But there's less severe examples of that on this show, but that's one that Matt introduced me to, and dude, I love you, man, but that's tough. I don't know if that's a pill I can swallow, man. I don't know if I could watch through an entire episode with that, let me tell you. But yeah, I'll go Matt tier overall. I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but there's definitely some instances where it's like, I don't know about this dude. I don't know, man. Holy moly. I fucking hate this show. I really do. Listen, I understand why people like this. I mean, I like mini golf. I like Rob Riggle, that's fine. But I fucking hate this show, man. I don't know what it is really, because it's such a dumb idea. It's such a stupid, basic idea, that it doesn't even warrant hating. It doesn't even deserve to be hated. But just something about the execution. It's like over the top goofy. It should play it a little more straight than it does, I feel like, because it's pretty impressive. I mean, mini golf, all things considered, is like, it's not like the most athletic sport of all time or anything, but it is pretty cool to see some of these courses and how they've designed them and stuff, and like there is some skill involved with getting a hole in one or something, or like making a good putt on some of these obstacles and stuff. So but yeah, it's kind of too over the top with how silly it is and how goofy the commentary is. I mean, Rob Riggle, that's what he does. He's a comedian, but I don't know. It just doesn't have the right tone. I think sometimes it just doesn't really read the room all that well a lot of the time. So for me, it's just not a very good show. Hollywood Game Night, kind of in that same boat where it's just like kind of over the top silliness, but I'll put it in a good tier. It's definitely a novelty for sure. This is the kind of show that I feel like would have done so much better had it been made in the streaming era. If this was like a Peacock exclusive, this would be like, pretty fun to see, and like it would be a novelty for sure, but it would play a lot better than if like, because the way that NBC did it, obviously, it was made back in like 2014, so it was on TV and it had like a primetime slot. And this is just not the kind of show that warrants a national spotlight like that, you know what I mean? It's just contestants playing these like little trivia games or They'll do, like name that tune sort of stuff, or charades or something like that. But it was fun. It was fun for what it is. Like, it's super gimmicky, but if you can get past it, there is like a novelty to it that is kind of, interesting and addicting at times. And we actually, as a family, we watched it so much that we got the home game version of it, the board game version, and we play that sometimes. And it can be pretty fun. So, I'm not going to hate on it too much because it's not really meant to be taken super seriously, but it's not like objectively amazing by any means. So I think good tier is a fair compromise there. Home Improvement, that's another one that's going to go in the good tier. It has a bigger fan base than maybe you'd be expecting because it was a very popular show in its heyday, man. It was a very popular show, which is understandable because Tim Allen is a very, very fun guy to watch. Pretty funny dude in any capacity. But yeah, it's not really something that I would watch all that much now. I have stated in the past that I am a bigger fan of Last Man Standing, which is a pretty unpopular opinion that I hold, but I stand by it. But even still, I think Home Improvement has its moments, so I'll say good tier. Home movies here, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Where did it go? There it is. Yeah, this is definitely going to go in the great tier for sure. I mean, if you like animated, sitcoms, if you like just like very simple styles with, where the animation itself is not even the draw, like there's some animated shows that are just so beautiful and like so gorgeous to look at. This is not one of them by any means, but it has this very, rustic sort of, homemade kind of charm to it where it's not super polished, it's not super, it doesn't really feel like it's complete almost to some degree, but that's what makes it so fun to watch because it feels like it's trying to just be as bare bones as possible and just give you exactly what you want. It has like a Beavis and Butthead feel to it almost, where the animation is very rough and it has this very like archaic sense of a story, right? If you can even call it that, but it does so in a way where you find a lot of charm and you find a lot of peace with it. So that's kind of my take on it. But yeah, absolutely great, absolutely phenomenal show for sure. Hoops here, underrated. I don't know why people don't like Hoops. I'm putting it in the great tier, and no one can stop me. Boom, look at that. Fuck all the haters. I don't like you. Hotel Hell. This is not a great show, but I mean, it's not something I'd turn off either. I'll put it in the good tier. I mean, Gordon Ramsay, his shtick, it's really something you either like or you don't, and obviously I do enjoy it. The idea of like criticizing a hotel is kind of weird, and I really could go without seeing his hairy ass. That was a thing on this show. But yeah, I don't know if I'd watch it nowadays, but for filler, if you just need to kill an hour, you could do worse. House Hunters on HGTV. I think this is the only HGTV show I've ever seen. It's just meh, it's not trying to target someone like me, so it's whatever. But the only reason I put it on here really is because like I don't know if I'm ever gonna get a chance to talk about this show, so I'll take my opportunity now in saying that this show has had 200 seasons. Not 200 episodes, 200 seasons. So take that, The Simpsons. Take that, SVU. You're not even close to being the show with the most amount of seasons out there. Yeah. According to Wikipedia, the reason they were able to do that is because they had any number of 15 different crews at any given time following these people, like anywhere in the US you could find an open market and people that were willing to be on TV, they would send a crew down there. So think about that. If they, like, say it took a week to make an episode, 52 weeks in a year, times that by 15, it's like 750 episodes you could produce in a year. It's pretty impressive, I must say. The show's been on for, what, 10 years now? It'd be like 7,000 episodes. I'm not saying there's that many, but yeah, 200 seasons, that seems reasonable now, considering how much production went into this fucking show. So yeah, there's my piece on House Hunters. I don't know if we're going to talk about it again, so I used my opportunity here. House of Cards. Not really big on it, honestly. I mean, outside of Kevin Spacey, it's very dry. It's very by the number. Like, not even that. It's so serious. It has like almost no humor to it or no charm to it at all. It does not appeal to me at all. Like, I just can't get past a show that takes itself super seriously. It has to have some balance between there. If you couldn't tell by now, it's like, if you're gonna do the drama, if you're gonna do a more serious tone with it, you gotta have like comic relief. You gotta have like kind of a goofy character to kind of balance it out. And this has none of that. And I mean, Kevin Spacey as well. It's like, are we gonna really give him a platform? Are we gonna support him? Probably not. You know what I mean? So I don't want to put it any higher than on that tier because it's just not warranted. Just not deserving. House, another medical drama. I should put House in the good tier. I do like House. It's not really as focused on the medical aspects of it, like the actual like surgery, and like the procedures and stuff, which is the main reason why I personally am not really a big fan of medical dramas. And it does take place in a hospital, obviously, but there are some like other elements to it that aren't set in the hospital, which is kind of nice. It's a bit more refreshing than some of the other standard, like just by the book medical dramas out there. So I'll put it in good there. Hugh Laurie also does a good job there. There's enough positives to kind of have it stand out from the rest of the pack. How I Met Your Father, oh boy, and How I Met Your Mother, of course, next up. Well, you know how I feel about How I Met Your Mother, so I don't really need to go into detail about that. How I Met Your Father, though, I don't know if y'all know this, but I do like the show. It's not a secret. I've been very open about it. That I think it's well made. It has a good cast to it. It's funny, which is what a sitcom should be. And above all else, it keeps me watching. It wants me, I'm intrigued by the story. I'm intrigued by the characters. I'm really excited for season 2. It does have the callbacks. It does have the Easter eggs and the references and stuff, which is fun. But even just on its own merits, if it didn't have any of that other stuff, just judging it based on the characters that it presents and the storylines it presents, I think it's a pretty damn good show. It has the right elements between something that takes from How I Met Your Mother and uses it to its advantage, but it also has enough of its unique brand and unique voice to stand out from the rest of the multi-camp sitcoms that are out nowadays in a genre which is kind of dying off because of lack of public interest. And it did kind of have a bit of a resurgence with How I Met Your Father because it was one of the biggest shows in that style in the last 15 years. So all things told, that's definitely in the great tier. And then obviously How I Met Your Mother. I mean, come on, pretty obvious by now, I think. How it's made here, another one that's kind of similar to Unwrapped and Food Factory, but it's not just focused on food. It has a lot of different, like how pencils are made and shit. I'll put it in the good tier. It's fine, it's not something I'm going to watch all the time, but it can be entertaining too. Bill Wirtz on YouTube here, he does the history of the world, like the entire history of the world, I guess, video, and he does like some music stuff. I'll put him in good. Not, the most memorable. Well, he is pretty memorable, but like most of his stuff is so short that you can't really, it's not going to stick with you because there's not enough substance to really do it with. But, he's had a couple of decent videos here and there, so put him in good. Swoozy is another one that I think belongs in good as well. At his prime, he was one of my favorites. He does like storytime YouTube. He's like a storytime YouTuber, and he does a lot of animation stuff as well. He'll animate the stories, that he's talking about, but it's very crude, it's like stick figure drawings and stuff. So kind of has that, kind of rustic, homemade appeal to it as well. But the problem really with storytime YouTubers in general is like once you run out of stories, you know, where do you go from there? You know what I mean? And he doesn't really make content anymore. I don't think he's posted really in a while, at least, or he doesn't do it as regularly, at least. So, you know, just didn't have that drive, which is understandable because again, like, you know, once you run through all your stories, then you don't really have much else to make. So it's just kind of inevitable that you're just going to run out of content eventually. So that's the biggest issue. But in his prime, he was definitely one of the best. I Dream of Janine here. It's a bad show, man. It has not aged well at all. It is so dated. It is so freaking dated. You know, it's from the 60s, so there's, you know, some aspects to it that's just like, yeah, that's how they did things back then. But man, it's hard to watch nowadays, and it's just not really that funny. For a sitcom, it should be funny, you know, and I just didn't really get a lot of laughs out of it. So for me, it's bad tier. And I think we're gonna end this episode with I Love Lucy, a good one to end with because it is one of the most iconic here of all time. I'm going to put it up in the A1 tier. I genuinely really, really like this show, even if, you know, you're just wanting to watch it for its historic purposes and the fact that it's, you know, one of the biggest sitcoms out there. I think you're going to genuinely enjoy it. There's so many shows that have taken from I Love Lucy, that have done bits from I Love Lucy, you know, in a more modern day approach. And you know, it was just such a groundbreaking show, and so many things that started with elements and such that were present there that were never seen prior, and even outside of the show as well, like just for TV in general. I mean, it was one of the first shows to utilize a multicam setup, which is so commonplace now, you know, and it was Desi Arnaz who literally like prototypes the idea of having a studio that was built for multiple cameras. You know, I mean, he was really the one, like, you know, that was involved with the production like that. So just such a, you know, influential show, just such an appealing show in so many different ways. Simple humor, you know, universally understood. Like, there's a reason it's lasted for so long. You know what I mean? There's a good reason why it's lasted for 70 years now. So that is going to be it for this episode of the every single TV show I've seen tier list here. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Like I said, let me know what shows you like and dislike here, and what are some of your favorites that you have seen from this tier list here. With that, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching.